The letter arrived on the coldest morning of her life. Lian Hua's hands trembled as she read the words that would change everything. Marry a rancher in America. He owns nothing, expects nothing. You will work hard. Her village elders called it charity. Her neighbors called it exile. But when Lian stepped off that dusty wagon weeks later and saw the empire hidden behind the lie, miles of golden land, a mansion against the sky, and a man whose loneliness ran deeper than any poverty, she realized the truth. Someone had been lying, and the secret would either save her or destroy them both. Want to know what happens next? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The journey across the Pacific Ocean taught Lian Hua something her village elders never mentioned. Hope could rot faster than fish in the sun. 23 days on a cargo ship that smelled like rust and broken promises. 23 nights listening to other women whisper their fears into the darkness of the hold. Most were mail-order brides like her, clutching photographs of men they'd never met, trading stories that all ended the same way. At least it's better than starving. Lian didn't even have a photograph. The marriage broker in Guangdong had been blunt. The American rancher didn't send one. Says he's not much to look at. Says his ranch is small and the work is hard. Says any woman willing to come won't care what he looks like anyway. Her aunt had grabbed Lian's hand across the table, desperate. You have to take it. After your father's debts, after the scandal with the Zhang family, no one here will marry you. This is your only chance. Only chance. The words had followed her across the ocean like a curse. Now, standing on American soil for the first time, Lian understood what the broker had really meant. She was the woman no one else wanted, being sent to a man no one else would take. The port city of San Francisco rose around her in a chaos of noise and movement. Men shouted in languages she didn't recognize. Wagons clattered past. The air tasted like salt and coal smoke. Everything was too big, too loud, too fast. You, Chinese girl. You, Lian Hua? The voice was harsh, American-accented English that Lian barely understood. She turned to find a weathered white woman in a dark dress, holding a clipboard like a weapon. Yes, Lian managed, the English word clumsy in her mouth. I'm Mrs. Patterson. Immigration processing. Come with me. The next 3 hours were a blur of questions, inspections, and paperwork. Mrs. Patterson poked through Lian's single battered suitcase with the enthusiasm of someone searching for contraband. She found only 2 changes of clothing, a comb, and the marriage contract signed by a man named Coulter Hayes. Says here he's a rancher in Wyoming territory, Mrs. Patterson said, squinting at the document. Middle of nowhere. You know what you're getting into, girl? Yes, Lian lied. Mrs. Patterson's expression suggested she knew better. You speak English? Little bit. Better learn fast. Out there, you'll be lucky if you see another Chinese face for years. She stamped the paperwork with unnecessary force. You're cleared. Train to Wyoming leaves in 2 hours. Don't miss it. Lian didn't miss it, but she almost wished she had. The train carried her away from the coast, away from anything remotely familiar. Through the window, America unfolded like a landscape from someone else's dream. Endless forests gave way to plains that stretched so far, Lian's eyes hurt trying to find the horizon. Mountains rose like broken teeth against the sky. And always, always, the sheer space of it, room enough to lose yourself forever. The other passengers avoided her. A few stared with open curiosity. One woman pulled her children away when Lian walked past, as if poverty and foreignness might be contagious. After 2 days and 3 train changes, Lian finally reached the settlement of Clearwater, Wyoming territory. The name was absurdly optimistic. There was no clear water in sight, just a handful of weather-beaten buildings squatting in the dust, a general store, a blacksmith, a saloon, and what might charitably be called a hotel. End of the line, the conductor announced. Clearwater, God help you. Lynn stepped onto the platform carrying her suitcase in a growing sense of doom. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if she hadn't been so terrified. A few locals watched her with the casual interest people reserve for unexpected entertainment. You the Chinese bride? The question came from a middle-aged man leaning against a wagon. He had kind eyes but a voice that carried pity. Yes, I am Lian Hua, looking for Coulter Hayes. The man's expression shifted into something complicated. Coulter sent me to fetch you. Name's William Reed. I run the general store. He took her suitcase, handling it like it might break. Come on. It's a 2-hour ride to Hayes's ranch. Lian climbed into the wagon, her body aching from days of travel. William clicked his tongue and the horses started moving. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Lian watched the landscape roll past. Empty plains, distant mountains, sky that went on forever. Finally, William broke the silence. You know anything about Coulter Hayes? The marriage broker said he is a rancher. He works hard. He needs a wife. William made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. That's one way to put it. Something in his tone made Lian's stomach tighten. What is wrong with him? Nothing's wrong with him exactly. Coulter's a good man, honest, works harder than anyone I know. William paused, choosing his words carefully. But he's been alone out there for years now, keeps to himself. Doesn't come into town much. Some folks think he's a little, crazy? I was going to say peculiar, but yeah, some say crazy. Lian closed her eyes. Of course, a crazy American rancher in the middle of nowhere. What had she expected? A fairy tale? How poor is he? She asked quietly. William's hands tightened on the reins. Poor? Who told you Coulter was poor? The marriage broker. He said the ranch is small. The work is hard. There is not much money. This time William definitely laughed, but it sounded almost angry. He shook his head. You'll see when we get there. Just don't judge too quick, all right? Coulter's got his reasons for how he lives. The cryptic answer did nothing to calm Lian's nerves. They rode on as darkness fell. Stars appeared overhead, more than Lian had ever seen in her life. The temperature dropped, and she pulled her thin coat tighter. William noticed and draped a blanket over her shoulders without comment. Almost there, he said eventually. Lian peered into the darkness and saw nothing. Then gradually, shapes emerged from the gloom. A fence line, well-maintained and running straight as an arrow. More fences, gates, the silhouettes of buildings against the starlit sky. The wagon turned onto a path and Lian's breath caught. This wasn't a small ranch. This wasn't poverty. Even in the darkness, she could tell. The main house was massive, 2 stories of solid timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Outbuildings scattered across the property, all well kept, corrals holding horses that looked healthy and strong. Everything spoke of care, investment, and substantial wealth. I don't understand, Lian whispered. William pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. Like I said, Coulter's got his reasons. The front door opened, spilling warm light into the night. A figure stepped onto the porch, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who'd learned not to startle skittish things. Coulter Hayes. Lian's first thought was that the marriage broker had lied about everything. This man wasn't old or ugly or broken. He was maybe 35, with dark hair, a face weathered by sun and wind, and eyes that caught the lamplight like deep water. Her second thought was that those eyes looked profoundly, achingly lonely. Thank you, William, Coulter said. His voice was low and rough, like he didn't use it much. No trouble. I'll just help the lady with her. I've got it. Coulter came down the steps and took Lian's suitcase with one hand, offering his other to help her down from the wagon. His grip was warm and calloused. Thank you for the ride. William tipped his hat to Lian. Ma'am, good luck to you both. Then quieter, to Coulter. Treat her right. Always planned to. The wagon pulled away, leaving Lian alone with this stranger who was apparently her husband. They stood in the pool of porch light, studying each other. Up close, Coulter was even more unexpected. He had the build of someone who worked hard physically, but there was an education in his eyes, a sharpness that didn't match the image of a simple rancher. And that loneliness, it radiated off him like heat. I'm sorry, he said finally. I know this isn't what you expected. The broker was supposed to... He stopped, jaw tightening. Never mind what he was supposed to do. You're here now, and you're probably exhausted. Lian found her voice. My English is not so good. It's better than my Chinese. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Come inside. You can have the guest room tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. He picked up her suitcase and walked toward the house, expecting her to follow. Lian hesitated on the threshold of her new life. then stepped forward. The interior of the house stole what was left of her breath. Hardwood floors polished to a gleam, furniture that was simple but well made, a stone fireplace big enough to stand in, bookshelves lining one wall filled with more volumes than Lian had ever seen in one place, electric lights, actual electric lights, a luxury even in San Francisco. This wasn't just wealth. This was serious money pretending to be modest. "Kitchen's through there," Coulter said, pointing. "There's food if you're hungry. Bathroom upstairs, second door on the left. Your room is the first door." He set her suitcase at the foot of the stairs. "I'll be in the barn for a while. Work to finish. Make yourself at home." He was already halfway to the door when Lian found the courage to ask, "Why did you lie?" Coulter stopped but didn't turn around. "About what?" "The marriage broker. He said you were poor, that your ranch was small, that there was nothing here." She gestured at the house around them. "This is not nothing." For a long moment, Coulter stood frozen. Then he turned, and the expression on his face was equal parts shame and defiance. "I didn't lie," he said quietly. "I just didn't correct anyone when they made assumptions. There's a difference." "Why?" "Because—" He broke off, ran a hand through his hair. "Because I needed to know you'd come anyway. That you'd marry a poor rancher with nothing to offer, not a rich one with everything to lose." The words hung between them like a confession. "I don't understand," Lian said. "You will. Eventually." Coulter's voice was rough with something that might have been regret. "Get some rest, Lian Hua. Tomorrow we'll talk. Really talk. And then you can decide if you want to stay or if you want me to arrange passage back to San Francisco." He left before she could respond, the door closing softly behind him. Lian stood alone in the beautiful house, surrounded by wealth that shouldn't exist, married to a man who pretended to have nothing. Nothing about this made sense. She climbed the stairs on shaking legs and found the guest room exactly where Coulter said it would be. It was simple but clean, with a real bed, clean sheets, and a window overlooking the dark plains. Her suitcase waited at the foot of the bed. Lian sat down heavily, trying to process everything. The marriage broker's lies. William's cryptic warnings. Coulter's admission that he'd hidden his wealth on purpose. The loneliness in his eyes that made her chest ache even though she'd just met him. What kind of man owned all this and let the world think he was poor? What kind of man needed to test his bride's character before revealing the truth? And what kind of woman had she become, that even this strange situation felt safer than the life she'd left behind? Lian lay back on the bed, still fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered secrets she couldn't understand. Somewhere in the barn, her husband was doing whatever mysterious work occupied his nights. Tomorrow, he'd promised answers. Tomorrow, she could choose to stay or leave. But even as exhaustion pulled her toward sleep, Lian knew the truth. She had nowhere else to go. This beautiful, bewildering ranch was her only chance. She just had to figure out what Coulter Hayes was hiding and whether his secrets would save her or destroy them both. Morning came too early and too bright. Lian woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the distant sound of someone working. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then reality crashed back. America, Wyoming, a husband who'd lied about being poor. She sat up, her body aching from weeks of travel. The room looked different in daylight, less intimidating but no less foreign. Through the window, she could see the full scope of the ranch for the first time. It was staggering. The land stretched in every direction, fenced and organized with obvious care. Horses grazed in distant paddocks. Cattle dotted the hillsides. Outbuildings she hadn't noticed in the dark now revealed themselves. A massive barn, storage sheds, what looked like worker housing, all in excellent repair. This wasn't just a ranch. This was an operation worth a fortune. Lian found a wash basin with clean water waiting and did her best to make herself presentable. Her 2 changes of clothing were wrinkled from the journey. She chose the less damaged option and braided her hair, trying to look like someone who belonged in a house this nice. She didn't succeed. Downstairs, she followed the smell of coffee to the kitchen. Coulter was already there, standing at the stove with his back to her. He'd clearly been up for hours. His clothes were dusty, his hair damp like he'd dunked his head in the water trough. "There's eggs," he said without turning around. "And bread. Help yourself." Lian hesitated in the doorway. "You cook for yourself?" "Usually." He plated the eggs and finally looked at her. In full daylight, the loneliness in his eyes was even more pronounced. Did you sleep? Yes, thank you. They stood there awkwardly, two strangers bound by a contract signed thousands of miles apart. Coulter gestured to the table. Sit. Please. We should eat before we talk. The food was simple but good. Coulter ate mechanically, like it was just fuel. Lian tried to match his pace, but kept getting distracted by the details of the kitchen, the cast iron stove, the ice box, the cabinets full of supplies. Everything was there, well stocked and maintained, but something felt wrong. It took her a moment to realize. There were no signs of help, no servants, no hired hands eating breakfast, no one else at all. Where are your workers? She asked. Coulter's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Don't have any. Not anymore. But the ranch is so big. How do you... I manage. He set down his fork, the meal apparently over. I know it doesn't make sense. That's what we need to talk about. He stood, carried his plate to the sink, and turned to face her fully. I'm going to tell you the truth now. All of it. And then you're going to make a choice. Lian's heart hammered. All right. Not here. Outside. I think better when I'm moving. He led her out onto the porch and down the steps toward the corrals. The morning air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of grass and horses. Coulter walked with his hands shoved in his pockets, eyes fixed on the horizon. My family name is Hayes, he began. Maybe that doesn't mean anything to you, but 20 years ago, in this territory, it meant everything. My father built an empire, ranches, rail contracts, mining interests. We had houses in Denver, Chicago, even New York, money that would take 3 lifetimes to spend. He stopped walking, his jaw tight. And it destroyed us, not the money itself, what it brought with it. People who wanted it, people who'd do anything to get it. Lian waited, sensing there was more. My father became paranoid, started seeing betrayal everywhere, even in his own family. My mother drank herself to death trying to cope with dinner parties full of vultures. My brother. Coulter's voice cracked. My brother killed himself 3 weeks before his wedding. Couldn't stand the pressure anymore. Couldn't tell which of his friends actually liked him and which just wanted access to the Hayes fortune. The pain in his voice was so raw that Lian unconsciously stepped closer. I was 27 when they both died within 6 months of each other. Left me with everything, the whole goddamn empire. He laughed bitterly. And I realized I hated all of it. Every mansion, every business deal, every person who suddenly wanted to be my friend. Women who'd never looked at me twice were lining up to marry into the Hayes name. Men who'd called me soft were offering partnerships. He started walking again, faster now, like he was trying to outrun the memories. So I made a choice. Sold almost everything, the houses, the businesses, the investments. Kept this land because I actually loved it. This is where I grew up, before the money got too big. This is where I learned to ride, to work cattle, to fix fences. This was real. They'd reached a fence overlooking a valley. Coulter gripped the top rail with both hands. I let everyone think I'd lost it all. Bad investments, they said. Poor Coulter Hayes squandering his inheritance, living like a hermit out on his broken-down ranch. His knuckles were white. And you know what? It was the best thing I ever did. Because suddenly, people left me alone. No more vultures. No more fake friends. Just me, and the land, and the truth. Lian finally understood. But you were lonely. Yeah. The admission was quiet. I was lonely. I'm lonely. This place is beautiful, but it's empty. Working it alone, he shook his head. I'm not built for that. I wanted a partner, Lian finished softly. Yes, but not someone who wanted the Hayes fortune, someone who wanted... He finally looked at her. I know it was wrong, lying to the broker, making sure you thought you were marrying a poor rancher with a hard life ahead, but I had to know. I had to know you'd come anyway. The wind swept across the valley, bending the grass in waves. Lian stared out at the land that was somehow both a paradise and a prison. You tested me, she said. Yes. You thought I might refuse if I knew the truth. I thought you might come for the wrong reasons. Lian turned to face him fully. And what if I tell you that I came because I had no choice? That in my village, I was worthless. My father died in debt. A merchant's son refused to marry me after my family lost everything. The broker said America needed wives. He said a rancher needed help. He said it was my only chance. Coulter's expression crumbled. I'm sorry. I didn't know. You didn't ask. Her voice was sharper than she intended. You tested me like I was applying for a job. You wanted to make sure I was good enough for your secret fortune, but you never asked what I wanted, what I needed, what I was running from. The words hung between them, honest and brutal. You're right, Coulter said quietly. I'm sorry. That was selfish. They stood in silence, two broken people from different worlds, bound by a contract that suddenly felt fragile as paper. What happens now? Lian asked. That's up to you. I meant what I said last night. If you want to leave, I'll arrange it. Passage back to San Francisco. Enough money to start over. No questions asked. And if I stay? Coulter met her eyes, and she saw fear there. Real, vulnerable fear. Then we figure it out. Together. A real partnership, not a test. I work this ranch. You do whatever you want. Help if you want to help. Learn if you want to learn. This place is yours as much as mine, legally and practically. I know nothing about ranches. I'll teach you, if you want. I don't love you. I don't love you either. Not yet. He managed a small, sad smile. But I think we could learn that too, if we're both willing. Lian looked out at the vast expanse of land stretching to the mountains. Back in her village, she'd been worthless. Here, she was being offered a kingdom. But kingdoms came with costs. Why me? She asked. Why a Chinese bride from across the ocean? Why not someone local? Coulter's laugh was harsh. Because everyone local knows the Hayes name, knows the history. Even if they believed I was poor now, they'd remember what I was. You're the only person for 1,000 miles who met me without preconceptions, who saw me, not my family legacy. It made sense in a twisted way. They were both hiding from something, both trying to start over. I need time, Lian said, to think, to understand this place. Take all the time you need. And I need you to be honest. No more tests, no more secrets. Agreed. She turned to face him fully. I came here expecting misery, a hard life with a difficult man. I prepared myself to work until my hands bled and sleep in a cold house and eat nothing but bread and water. I know. Instead, I find this. She gestured at the beautiful land, the well-kept buildings. I don't know how to process it. I don't know if I'm relieved or angry or scared. Probably all three, Coulter said quietly. That's fair. Lian took a deep breath. The morning sun was climbing higher, warming her face. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out. I will stay, she said finally. For now, but not as a wife. Not yet. As a partner, like you said. Someone learning this life. Relief washed over Coulter's face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm very stubborn. I'm counting on it. They stood there a moment longer, two damaged people making an uneasy alliance. Then Coulter cleared his throat. I should get back to work. There's fence line that needs checking in the north pasture. You're welcome to come with me, or explore the house, or do whatever you want. Lian thought about it. She could retreat to the safety of the house, process everything in private, or she could start learning this strange new world. I'll come with you, she decided, but I need better clothes. This dress is not made for ranch work. Coulter's surprise was genuine. You want to work? You said partnership. Partners work together, yes? For the first time since she'd arrived, Coulter's smile reached his eyes. Yeah, they do. Come on. I think there's some old work clothes in the storage room that might fit you. They walked back to the house together, and Lian felt something shift. Not love. It was too soon for that. But possibility. The first fragile thread of connection between two people who desperately needed to not be alone anymore. The work clothes were men's, several sizes too big, but Lian rolled up the sleeves and legs and declared them adequate. Coulter tried not to laugh at how ridiculous she looked and failed. Lian glared at him, which only made him laugh harder. I look terrible, she said. You look determined. That's better. He saddled two horses, a gentle mare for Lian and a larger gelding for himself. Lian had never ridden before, and the first few minutes were terrifying. But Coulter was patient, explaining the basics, steadying her when she wobbled. Relax, he said. The horse can feel your fear. Just breathe. Easier said than done. But gradually, Lian found a rhythm. The mare seemed to understand she was dealing with a nervous beginner and moved carefully. They rode out across the ranch, Coulter pointing out landmarks and explaining the layout. The north pasture, the creek that ran year-round, the sheltered valley where the cattle wintered. Every piece of land had a story, and Coulter told them all with quiet pride. "This is what I actually care about," he said at one point. "Not the money, the work, the land, knowing every fence post and water source, building something real." Lynn understood that. It was the same pride her father had taken in his small shop before debt destroyed him. The satisfaction of creating something with your own hands. The fence line inspection was exactly as mundane as it sounded. They rode slowly along miles of fencing, Coulter checking for damage, making notes about repairs. But there was something meditative about it too. The steady rhythm of the horses, the endless sky, the silence broken only by wind and birdsong. Around midday, they stopped to rest near a creek. Coulter produced a canteen and some hard bread from his saddlebag, and they sat in the shade, eating in comfortable quiet. "Can I ask you something?" Lian said eventually. "Anything. Why didn't you hire workers? You could afford them." Coulter picked at the bread. "I did at first. After I sold everything and moved back here full-time, hired a crew to help run the place. Good men, hard workers, but—" He trailed off. But they pitied me. Kept saying things like, "It's such a shame," and "What a fall from grace." Treated me like I was some tragic figure they needed to handle carefully. I couldn't stand it. He threw a pebble into the creek. So I let them go. Told everyone I was cutting costs. The rumor mill did the rest. Hayes is going broke, can't even afford ranch hands. And suddenly people stopped pitying me and started avoiding me instead, which was better. "So you work this whole ranch alone? For 3 years now?" "Yeah." "That's insane." "Probably." He shot her a wry look. "You starting to understand why I wanted a partner?" Lian laughed despite herself. "You wanted free labor. I wanted someone who'd see the work and the land, not the money and the family name. Someone who'd choose to be here because they wanted to build something, not because they wanted access to a fortune." "And you think I'm that person?" "I think you might be. You came expecting nothing. That's more than anyone else has given me in years." They finished eating and mounted up again. The afternoon stretched into fence lines and pasture checks, and Coulter's patient explanations of ranch management. Lian's legs ached from riding, her hands already blistered from gripping the reins wrong, but she refused to complain. By the time they returned to the house, the sun was setting and Lian could barely walk. Coulter helped her down from the horse with obvious amusement. "You did good today," he said. "Most people would have quit hours ago." "I'm too stubborn to quit." "I noticed." That night, they ate dinner together at the kitchen table, a simple meal of stew that Coulter had made that morning. The conversation was easier now, less guarded. Coulter asked about her journey from China, and Lian told him about the endless ocean voyage, the strange customs in San Francisco, the shock of seeing America for the first time. "Do you miss home?" he asked. "I miss what home was before everything fell apart, but that place doesn't exist anymore." She stirred her stew. "What about you? Do you miss your old life?" "Never. Not even once." His certainty was absolute. That life was a prison made of gold. He gestured at the simple kitchen, the quiet house. "This is freedom." Later, as Lian climbed the stairs to the guest room, exhaustion finally catching up with her, Coulter called out from the bottom of the staircase. "Lian?" She turned. "Thank you for staying, for giving this a chance." She nodded, too tired for words, and continued up to her room. That night, lying in the darkness, Lian thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the truth, the work, the partnership. Coulter Hayes was nothing like she'd expected. Not poor, not cruel, not broken. Just lonely and scared and desperate for something real. She understood that. She was all those things too. Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered through the plains, and somewhere in the house, her accidental husband was probably lying awake with similar thoughts. They had a long way to go. Trust to build, a life to figure out. But for the first time since leaving China, Lian felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Not the rotting kind that died on cargo ships, the real kind. The kind that made you want to wake up and try again tomorrow. And tomorrow, she would. The first week passed in a blur of aching muscles and small discoveries. Lian woke before dawn each morning to find Coulter already gone, working somewhere on the vast ranch. She'd dress in the oversized work clothes, braid her hair tight, and venture out to find him. Sometimes he was in the barn, sometimes mending fence, sometimes checking on cattle scattered across the hills. He never asked her to join him, but he never turned her away either. By the fourth day, she stopped waiting to be invited. "You're going to wear yourself out," Coulter said one morning when she showed up at the barn while he was saddling horses. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "So are you." He couldn't argue with that. His own exhaustion was written in the stiffness of his movements, the deepening lines around his eyes. 3 years of working this ranch alone had taken a toll. They rode out together in silence, the routine already becoming familiar. Check the water sources, inspect the fences, count the cattle, look for signs of predators or sickness. The work was endless and repetitive and strangely satisfying. Lian's hands developed calluses. Her legs stopped screaming every time she mounted a horse. The Wyoming sun darkened her skin and brightened her hair with reddish tints. She learned to spot a broken fence post from 100 yards away, to read the weather in the morning sky, to move cattle without spooking them. Coulter taught her with the same patience he'd shown that first day. He didn't condescend or hover, just explained once, let her try, corrected her mistakes without judgment. She appreciated that more than he probably knew. What surprised her was how little they actually talked. Not from discomfort, but because the silence between them had become easy. They could work side by side for hours, communicate with gestures and glances, and feel more understood than in any conversation. But the nights were different. Dinner became their talking time. Coulter would cook. He was surprisingly good at it, and they'd sit at the kitchen table sharing the day's work and slowly, carefully, sharing pieces of their pasts. "My father was a tailor," Lian said one evening, watching steam rise from her tea. "Very skilled. People came from 3 towns over for his work. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable, respected." "What happened?" "A bad investment with the wrong business partner. My father trusted someone he shouldn't have. The debts piled up. He worked himself sick trying to pay them back. Died of exhaustion when I was 19. Coulter's expression tightened. "I'm sorry. My mother had died when I was young, so it was just me and the debts. The Zhang family offered to pay them if I married their second son. Seemed like a good solution." She laughed bitterly. "Until they saw how people treated me after my father's disgrace. Suddenly, I wasn't good enough. They broke the engagement, kept the property my father had put up as collateral, and spread rumors that I was the one who'd refused. Bastards." "Yes, the marriage broker found me crying in the market 6 months later. Said there were opportunities in America, men who needed wives and didn't care about Chinese village politics." She met Coulter's eyes. "He made it sound like charity. I knew it was desperation on both sides." Coulter pushed food around his plate. "Did he tell you anything true about me?" "He said you were a rancher who worked alone. That part was accurate." "That's about it, huh? Everything else was lies. But maybe," Lian chose her words carefully, "maybe those lies brought me somewhere better than the truth would have." Something shifted in Coulter's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. The next night he told her about his brother. Samuel was 2 years older. "Everything I wasn't. Charming, ambitious, good with people. My father groomed him to take over the business empire. Samuel hated it, but he never said so. Just kept smiling and making deals and getting engaged to a woman he barely knew because she came from the right family." Coulter's hands clenched around his coffee cup. "I found him in the stable. 3 weeks before the wedding, he'd shot himself, left a note that just said, 'I can't.' Nothing else. Just those 2 words." Lian reached across the table without thinking, covering his hand with hers. Coulter stared at their joined hands like he'd forgotten what human touch felt like. "My father never recovered. Started drinking, making paranoid accusations, seeing enemies everywhere. Drove away everyone who actually cared about him. When he died 6 months later, the doctors said heart failure. But I think he just gave up." Coulter's voice was barely above a whisper. "My mother had already been gone a year by then. Pills and alcohol. Everyone said it was an accident. I knew better." "You lost everyone." "Everyone who mattered, yeah. What was left were vultures and opportunists. So I burned it all down and came here. They sat in silence, hands still touching across the table. Two people carrying the weight of family destruction, finding unexpected understanding in a kitchen thousands of miles from where either of them started. We're quite a pair, Lian said finally. Broken recognizes broken. Maybe. Or maybe we're just smart enough to know when to leave something poisonous behind. Coulter's fingers tightened around hers briefly before he pulled away, clearing his throat. More coffee? Please. The moment passed, but something had changed. The careful distance they'd been maintaining felt less necessary now. By the second week, they'd developed a rhythm. Coulter would wake first, start breakfast, feed the horses. Lian would come down as the sun rose, and they'd eat quickly before heading out to whatever work the day required. Lunch was often eaten in the saddle or sitting on a fence rail. Dinner was the day's reward, a time to rest aching bodies and share thoughts without the distraction of labor. Lian started taking over some of the cooking. Her Chinese dishes confused Coulter at first. He'd never seen half the techniques she used, but he ate everything she made without complaint. She learned to appreciate American food's simplicity, even if she sometimes missed the complexity of flavors from home. This is good, Coulter said one night, pointing at the stir-fried vegetables with chicken she'd prepared. What do you call it? I don't know the English name. In Chinese, it's... She said the words, knowing he wouldn't understand. Teach me. To say it? To make it. I want to know how to cook this. So she taught him, and he taught her how to make proper biscuits and gravy, and their kitchen became a place of exchange and laughter and flower fights that neither of them would admit to starting. The ranch itself began to feel less foreign. Lian learned the names of the horses: Molly, Scout, Ranger, Belle. She learned which pastures drained poorly after rain, which cattle were troublemakers, where the best fishing spots were along the creek. Coulter started trusting her with tasks unsupervised, and she took pride in completing them well. But the isolation started weighing on her. Days would pass without seeing another human face besides Coulter's. The silence of the plains, which had seemed peaceful at first, sometimes felt oppressive. She missed the noise of her village, the gossip at the market, the constant presence of other people. "Do you ever go into town?" she asked one evening. Coulter's shoulders tensed. "Not often." "How often is not often?" "Maybe once a month, for supplies I can't make or grow here. That's not very often." "No." Lian waited for elaboration. None came. She tried a different approach. "I've been here almost 3 weeks. I haven't seen anyone except William Reed that first night. Don't you have neighbors? Friends?" "I have William. He's a friend." "One friend." "That's more than most people get." The defensiveness in his voice was clear. Lian pushed anyway. "I'm going crazy out here, Coulter. I need to see other people. Talk to other women. Remember what civilization feels like. You're welcome to go into Clearwater anytime. Take the wagon, spend the day. I'm not keeping you prisoner." "I don't know the way. I barely speak English. I can't just wander into town alone." Coulter set down his fork with more force than necessary. "Fine. We'll go this Saturday. Happy?" Thrilled. They ate the rest of the meal in tense silence. Later, lying in bed, Lian wondered if she'd pushed too hard. But the loneliness was real, and she refused to pretend otherwise. Saturday came with reluctant sun fighting through clouds. Coulter hitched up the wagon with movements that suggested he'd rather be doing anything else. Lian dressed in her least damaged dress and tried to tame her hair into something presentable. The ride into Clearwater took 2 hours. Coulter spent most of it silent, jaw tight, hands gripping the reins like weapons. Lian tried to start conversations that died in the face of his monosyllabic answers. "Are you angry with me?" she finally asked. "No. You're acting angry. I'm acting like someone who doesn't want to go into town and face a bunch of people who think they know my business. They're your neighbors. They're gossips and busybodies who've been speculating about my life for 3 years. Now I'm bringing home a Chinese bride, and they'll have months of new material to chew on." Lian felt her own temper rising. "So I'm supposed to hide on your ranch forever? Never meet anyone? Never have a life outside of fence posts and cattle?" "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant." Coulter pulled the wagon to a stop so abruptly that Lian grabbed the seat to keep from falling. He turned to face her, and his eyes were burning with something between anger and fear. "You want to know the truth? Fine. I'm terrified of taking you into town. I'm terrified they'll say something cruel about you being Chinese. I'm terrified they'll treat you like you don't belong. I'm terrified you'll hear what they say about me, about us, and decide this was all a mistake." The raw honesty stopped Lian's anger cold. She stared at him, seeing the vulnerability he usually kept hidden. "What do they say about you?" she asked quietly. "That I went crazy after my family died, that I'm wasting my inheritance, that I'm a hermit living in squalor." He laughed bitterly. "Which is exactly what I wanted them to think, but it still feels like garbage when you hear it out loud." "And what will they say about me? Probably that I bought you like livestock, that you're only here because no American woman would have me, that it's pathetic watching a washed-up rich boy try to play rancher with a mail-order bride." The words landed like stones. Lian absorbed them, turned them over, and came to a decision. "Start the wagon." "What?" "Start the wagon. We're going to town, and when we get there, you're going to hold your head up and introduce me as your wife. And if anyone says something cruel, I'll handle it myself. I've survived worse than small-town gossips." Coulter searched her face. "You're sure?" "I didn't cross an ocean to hide. Drive." He drove. Clearwater looked even smaller in daylight, a handful of buildings clustered around a dusty main street, trying hard to be a real town. A few people were out on the Saturday morning, mostly gathered around the general store. They all stopped to stare as the wagon approached. Coulter pulled up in front of the store and climbed down. He came around to help Lian down, and she felt every eye on them. She kept her chin up, her expression neutral, refusing to show discomfort. William Reed came out of the store, wiping his hands on his apron. His face brightened when he saw them. "Coulter!" "Mrs. Hayes, didn't expect to see you two today." He shot Coulter a meaningful look. "Everything all right?" "Need supplies," Coulter said shortly. "And Lian wanted to see the town." "Well, come on in. Let me introduce you around properly, ma'am." Inside the store, several women were shopping. They all turned to stare when Lian entered. The silence was thick enough to cut. "Ladies," William said cheerfully, "this is Mrs. Lian Hayes. Just arrived from China a few weeks back. Lian, this is Mrs. Patterson." "We've met," the immigration officer said dryly. "How are you settling in, girl?" "Fine, thank you." Lian's English was still heavily accented, but clear enough. "And this is Sarah Mitchell, Mary Chen, and Elizabeth Thornton." The women murmured greetings with varying degrees of warmth. Mary Chen, who appeared to be Chinese herself, stepped forward with obvious relief. "You speak Cantonese?" she asked in that language. "Mandarin," Lian replied, switching languages gratefully. "But I understand some Cantonese." "Thank the heavens. I've been the only Chinese woman in this territory for 2 years. Are you all right? Is he treating you well?" The question was pointed enough that the other women noticed even without understanding the words. "He's treating me fine," Lian said firmly. "Better than fine." Mary looked skeptical but nodded. "If you need anything, help, advice, a place to stay, my husband and I run the laundry. You come find me." "Thank you." The conversation switched back to English, and the women began peppering Lian with questions. How was the journey? How did she like America? Was the ranch very isolated? Some questions were genuinely curious. Others had sharp edges Lian couldn't quite identify. Meanwhile, Coulter was dealing with his own interrogation from the men who'd gathered. "So you finally did it," one man said. "Got yourself a wife." "Looks that way, Tom." "Mail order," William says. "That's quite a step." "It's just a step. Don't make it more than it is." "She looks young," another man observed. "Pretty too. You treat her right, Hayes. We don't want any trouble." Coulter's voice went cold. "What kind of trouble would I cause, exactly?" "No offense meant, just saying. Chinese girl, long way from home, isolated ranch. Want to make sure she's there by choice." "She's there by choice, and she's my wife. Not some girl you need to protect from me." The tension in the air thickened. William stepped in smoothly. "Speaking of the ranch, how's that north fence holding up? Last time I was out there, looked like it might need reinforcement." The conversation shifted to safer topics, but Coulter's jaw stayed tight. Lian, meanwhile, was holding her own. When Elizabeth Thornton made a pointed comment about foreign influences in their community, Lian smiled sweetly and said, "I'm learning. Maybe one day I teach you Chinese cooking. Very healthy, very delicious." The offer was so disarmingly genuine that Elizabeth had no good response. Mary pulled Lian aside while the others were distracted. "They're going to talk," she said quietly in Cantonese. "About you, about him, about the marriage. Small towns are like that. Don't let it hurt you. I survived my own village turning against me. I can survive this." "Good. You're stronger than you look." Mary hesitated. "Is he really treating you well? Or are you just saying that?" Lian considered the question honestly. "He works hard. He's teaching me the ranch. He gave me the choice to stay or leave. He's lonely and damaged, but not cruel, not even close to cruel." "That's more than most of us got," Mary said with a trace of bitterness. "My husband bought me like property 15 years ago. Took me a decade to convince him I was a person. You're lucky if Hayes sees you as a partner from the start." "I think he does. Or he's trying to. Then hold on to that. It's rare." After an hour of shopping and socializing, Coulter finally extracted them both. The wagon was loaded with supplies, and Lian had a basket of vegetables Mary had insisted she take. As they drove out of town, Lian could feel the stares following them. "That went well," she said dryly. Coulter snorted. "If by well you mean we didn't get run out of town, sure. They're curious, that's natural. They're judging. There's a difference. Let them judge. We know the truth." Coulter glanced at her. "Which truth is that?" "That we're two people trying to build something real. What they think doesn't change that." The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. "You handled yourself well in there, better than I did. I've had practice being the outsider. You're the one who forgot how to deal with people. Ouch." "It's true. 3 years alone made you forget basic social skills." "Maybe. Or maybe I remembered how much I hate forced pleasantries and fake smiles." "Not everyone was fake. William seems genuine. Mary offered to help if I needed it. Even Mrs. Patterson wasn't cruel. Give them time. Small towns have long memories and sharp tongues." They rode in silence for a while. The plains stretched endlessly around them, golden in the afternoon sun. Lian thought about Mary's words, about being stronger than she looked. She thought about the women in the store, the mix of curiosity and judgment in their eyes. She thought about Coulter's fear of bringing her into his world and having it poison what they were building. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always. Why do you care what they think? You spent 3 years making them believe you were poor and crazy. You wanted them to leave you alone. So why does their gossip bother you?" Coulter was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because when it was just me, I could control the narrative. I could be the hermit rancher, and that was fine. But now they're talking about you too, and you didn't ask for that. You didn't ask to be part of the sad story of Coulter Hayes. I didn't ask for a lot of things, but I'm here anyway, and I can handle some gossip. You shouldn't have to." "Maybe not, but this is the life we have, the life we're building. It includes nosy neighbors and curious gossips. We can't hide forever." "I wasn't planning to hide forever. Just longer." "How much longer?" "I don't know. Until I figured out how to protect you from all of it." Lian turned to look at him fully. "I don't need protection, Coulter. I need a partner. There's a difference." His hands tightened on the reins. "I'm not good at this. At letting people in. At trusting that they won't leave or betray me or use me. I know. I'm not good at it either, but we're going to have to learn if this is going to work. And what if I can't? What if I'm too broken? Then we'll be broken together. That's the deal." Something like relief washed over Coulter's face. He didn't smile. He rarely smiled, but the tension in his body eased. They spent the rest of the ride in comfortable silence, and when they reached the ranch, Coulter helped her down from the wagon with a touch that lingered just slightly longer than necessary. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for handling today, for handling all of this. We're partners. You said so yourself." "Yeah, I did." They unloaded the supplies together as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that still took Lian's breath away. This wild, lonely place was becoming home in ways she hadn't expected, and the damaged man working beside her was becoming something more than a stranger she'd married out of desperation. Not love. Not yet. But the foundation of something that might become love if they were both brave enough to build it. That night, after dinner, Coulter disappeared into the room he used as an office. Lian heard him moving around, papers rustling. After about an hour, he emerged carrying a leather-bound book. I want to show you something, he said. He led her to the parlor and opened the book on the coffee table. It was full of photographs, old ones, sepia-toned and fragile. My family, Coulter said quietly, before everything fell apart. Lian looked at the images. A young Coulter with his brother Samuel, both smiling at the camera. Their mother, elegant in a formal gown. Their father, stern but proud. Pictures of the mansion in Denver, the ranch house before Coulter had sold off most of the surrounding property, family gatherings that looked stiff and uncomfortable. Samuel looks like you, she observed. People always said that, but he was better at pretending to be happy. Coulter pointed to a photograph of Samuel at his engagement party, surrounded by well-dressed guests. His smile didn't reach his eyes. This was 2 months before he died. Look at him, he's already gone. Lian could see it now, the emptiness behind the smile, the desperation in the way Samuel held himself. I'm sorry you lost him. I'm sorry I didn't save him. I knew he was drowning. I just didn't know how to help. You were young and dealing with your own pain. Not young enough to be excused, Coulter's voice was rough. I was 25, old enough to see what was happening, old enough to speak up. But I stayed silent because it was easier, because confronting my father would have meant admitting the whole empire was built on misery. Lian reached for his hand. This time, he didn't pull away. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, she said softly. Trust me. I watched my father work himself to death trying to pay debts that were never going to be paid. I begged him to stop, to walk away, to let it all go. He wouldn't. Said it was about honor, about family name, about not being a failure. She squeezed Coulter's fingers. Sometimes people choose their destruction, and we can't stop them. They sat together looking at the photographs of people who'd chosen wrong, who'd let wealth and pride and fear destroy them. Two survivors trying to build something different from the ruins. I don't want to make the same mistakes, Coulter said eventually. I don't want this ranch, this life, to become another prison. Then we won't let it. We'll keep it simple, keep it real, keep it about the work and the land, not the money. And if people find out the truth about the Hayes fortune I still have in banks and investments, then they find out. But they'll also see that we live simply, that we work hard, that the money doesn't define us. Coulter looked at her with something like wonder. How are you so sure about everything? I'm not sure about anything. I'm terrified most of the time, but I learned something when my whole life fell apart back home. What? That you can survive anything if you stop caring about what everyone else thinks. Their opinions didn't save me when I was drowning, and they won't destroy me now that I'm climbing out. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his whole face. You're kind of fierce, you know that? I'm stubborn, there's a difference. I'll take stubborn over weak any day. They talked late into the night, sharing stories from the photographs, piecing together the histories that had led them both to this unlikely partnership. Lian told him about her mother, who died when she was 8, and how she'd learned to cook by watching the neighbor women. Coulter told her about learning to rope cattle from the ranch hands when he was supposed to be studying finance with his tutors. I always loved this place, he said, looking around the parlor. Even when we only came here for summers, it felt real in a way the mansions never did. You could get dirty here, work hard, see the results of your labor. In Denver, everything was about appearances, about networking and deals and manipulating people. Here, a fence is a fence, cattle are cattle. The work is honest. That's why you kept it. That's why I kept it. And that's why... He hesitated, then pushed forward. That's why having you here feels right. You see the work. You value the land. You're not here for Hayes money or Hayes connections. You're here because we both needed a second chance. Lian felt something shift in her chest. Yes, that's exactly it. They sat in comfortable silence, the photographs spread between them like a bridge between their broken pasts and uncertain futures. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with them both. Coulter closed the album carefully and stood. Thank you for listening to all that. I've never shown these to anyone before. Thank you for trusting me with them. They stood awkwardly for a moment, neither quite sure how to end the evening. Finally, Coulter cleared his throat. Good night, Lian. Good night, Coulter. She climbed the stairs to her room, but sleep didn't come easily. Her mind kept circling back to the photographs, to Coulter's honesty, to the growing realization that this arrangement was becoming something more complicated than either of them had planned. She'd come here expecting survival. Instead, she was finding connection, purpose, maybe even the beginning of belonging. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Below, in his own room, Coulter lay awake with similar thoughts. The woman upstairs was nothing like he'd expected. Stronger, smarter, more resilient. She'd walked into his carefully constructed isolation and refused to be intimidated by it. She'd faced downtown gossip with more grace than he'd ever managed. She'd looked at his broken family history and offered understanding instead of pity. He'd thought he wanted a partner for the ranch work, a practical arrangement. He was starting to realize he'd accidentally found something far more dangerous, someone he might actually care about. The thought should have terrified him. After 3 years of deliberate loneliness, of protecting himself from connection and betrayal, he should have been putting up walls. Instead, all he could think about was the way Lian's hand had felt in his, and how much he wanted to reach for it again. Outside, the Wyoming wind swept across the dark plains, carrying the promise of change neither of them was quite ready to admit they wanted. The change came with the weather. Spring arrived in Wyoming like an invading army, sudden, violent, and impossible to ignore. The frozen ground thawed into mud that sucked at boots and wagon wheels. Creeks swelled with snow melt from the mountains, and with the thaw came work that made the winter months look easy. Calving season hit like a hammer. Lian had been on the ranch for 6 weeks when the first calf was born. She'd never seen anything like it. The laboring mother bellowing in distress, Coulter working with quiet efficiency to help the birth along, the wet and gangly newborn struggling to its feet within minutes. "Circle of life," Coulter said, wiping blood off his hands. "We'll have about 50 more of these in the next month." 50? Give or take. And some won't go this smoothly. He wasn't wrong. 3 days later, Lian woke at 2 a.m. to Coulter pounding on her door. "Need help. Breech birth. Now." She threw on clothes and ran downstairs. Outside, rain was pouring down in sheets. Coulter handed her a lantern, and they sprinted to the barn where a heifer was in obvious distress. "Hold the light steady," Coulter ordered, already moving to examine the struggling animal. "Don't look away no matter what you see." What Lian saw was brutal and messy and terrifying. Coulter worked for nearly an hour in the rain and blood and mud, finally pulling the calf free. It wasn't breathing. "No, no, no!" Coulter cleared the newborn's airways, rubbed it roughly with straw, breathed into its nose. Nothing. He kept trying, desperation making his movements rough. Lynn set down the lantern and grabbed more straw, mimicking Coulter's rubbing on the calf's other side. They worked together in frantic silence until finally, the calf coughed and drew a shuddering breath. Coulter sat back in the mud, soaked and exhausted. "Thank you." "Will it live?" "Maybe." 50-50 at this point. They stayed with the calf and its mother until dawn, making sure both were stable. By the time they trudged back to the house, they were covered in mud, blood, and things Lian didn't want to identify. "Welcome to calving season," Coulter said, stripping off his ruined shirt on the back porch. "It only gets worse from here." He wasn't exaggerating. The next 4 weeks were a blur of sleepless nights, emergency births, sick calves, anxious mothers, and constant vigilance. They took turns sleeping in the barn, checking on the pregnant cows every few hours. Lian learned to recognize the signs of labor, to assist with normal births, to spot problems before they became catastrophic. She also learned that ranching wasn't romantic or noble. It was hard and dirty and heartbreaking. Not every calf survived. Not every mother made it through labor, and sometimes, despite their best efforts, they'd find a newborn dead in the morning from causes they couldn't prevent. Coulter took every loss personally. He'd go silent and withdrawn, working even harder, as if physical exhaustion could drown out the guilt. Lian learned not to offer empty comfort during those times. Just work beside him and let him process in his own way. But the work brought them closer than any amount of careful conversation could have. There was no room for pretense when you were shoulder deep in a birthing cow at 3 a.m. No space for formality when you were both so tired you could barely stand. They moved together with increasing synchronization, anticipating each other's needs, communicating in grunts and gestures. One night, after a particularly difficult birth that they'd barely managed to save, they collapsed together on hay bales in the barn. Rain drummed on the roof. The rescued calf and its mother were settled in a nearby stall. "I couldn't do this without you," Coulter said into the darkness. I'd have lost half the herd by now. You managed before. Barely, and it was killing me. 3 years of doing this alone. He turned his head to look at her. You saved me, Lian, not just with the work, with everything. Lian's heart hammered against her ribs. You saved me too. I had nothing, nowhere to go. You had courage. That's more than nothing. They sat in comfortable silence, exhaustion making them both loose-lipped and honest. Can I ask you something? Lian said. Always. Why haven't you kissed me? The question hung in the air between them. Coulter went very still. I didn't think you wanted me to. I didn't, at first, but it's been 6 weeks. We live together, work together. We've seen each other at our worst. And sometimes you look at me like... She trailed off, losing courage. Like what? Like you want to, but then you pull away. Coulter sat up, running both hands through his hair. Because I'm terrified of messing this up. We have something good here, a partnership that works. If I push for more and you're not ready, I could ruin everything. And if I am ready? He turned to face her fully. Even in the dim light, she could see the want in his eyes, held carefully in check by fear. Are you? His voice was rough. Ready, I mean? Lian's answer was to close the distance between them and kiss him first. It was clumsy and tentative. Two people who'd been alone too long, suddenly remembering what connection felt like. Coulter's lips were chapped from wind and sun. Lian's were trembling with nerves. But when his hand came up to cup her face, gentle despite the calluses, something in her chest cracked open. The kiss deepened. Careful became hungry. Tentative became certain. Coulter's other hand found her waist, pulling her closer. Lian's fingers tangled in his hair, holding on like he might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Coulter rested his forehead against hers. That was... He didn't seem to have words. Overdue, Lian finished. Yeah, that. They stayed like that for a long moment, neither willing to move apart. Finally, Coulter pulled back just enough to see her face. I need you to know something. This isn't just convenience for me. You're not just a partner or a solution to my loneliness. He struggled for words. You're becoming important, really important, and that scares me. Why? Because everyone I've cared about either left or died or betrayed me, and I don't know if I can survive losing you too. Lian's throat tightened. I'm not going anywhere. You say that now. I mean it. Where would I go? This is my home now. She hesitated, then pushed forward with the same courage that had made her cross an ocean. You're becoming important to me too, and that terrifies me just as much as it terrifies you. Coulter kissed her again, softer this time. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. We're a mess, aren't we? The biggest mess I've ever seen. Think we can figure it out anyway? We've survived everything else. Why not this? They made their way back to the house as dawn broke, walking close enough that their shoulders bumped. Something fundamental had shifted between them. They weren't just partners anymore. They were something more fragile and more precious. Two broken people choosing to trust each other with the sharp edges. But the outside world had other plans. The trouble arrived 3 days later in the form of 2 men on expensive horses, riding up the long path to the ranch house like they owned it. Lian saw them first from the barn and went to find Coulter. Visitors, she said. Coulter looked up from the fence he was mending, saw the approaching riders, and swore under his breath. Stay here. Who are they? Vultures. He dropped his tools and headed toward the house. Please, Lian, just stay here. But Lian had never been good at following orders when her instincts screamed danger. She followed at a distance, close enough to hear. The 2 men dismounted in front of the house with the casual arrogance of people used to getting what they wanted. Both were well-dressed in city clothes that looked absurd against the ranch backdrop. The older one, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, smiled when he saw Coulter. Hey's been too long. Not long enough, Garrett. Coulter's voice was ice. What do you want? Is that any way to greet an old family friend? You were never my friend. You were my father's business partner. There's a difference. The other man, younger and meaner-looking, stepped forward. Your father would be ashamed of what you've done to the Hayes legacy. My father's dead. His opinion doesn't matter anymore. Garrett held up a placating hand. Now. No need for hostility. We're here with a business proposition. Very lucrative. The railroad is expanding through this territory, and they need land for a new route. Your land, specifically. Not interested. You haven't heard the offer yet. Don't need to. My land isn't for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price, Hayes. And trust me, this is the right price. Enough to rebuild the Hayes empire. Get you out of this. Garrett gestured dismissively at the ranch. Self-imposed poverty. Coulter's hands clenched into fists. Get off my property. Be reasonable. You're living like a hermit out here, working yourself to death. For what? Pride? Your father's legacy is crumbling while you play cowboy. My father's legacy deserved to crumble. It was built on greed and misery and destroyed everyone it touched. I'm not rebuilding it. The younger man sneered. So you'd rather waste your life on a failing ranch? We've heard the rumors, Hayes. No hired help. Can't afford basic maintenance. You're going broke out here. Then why do you want my land so badly? That stopped them both. Garrett recovered first, smooth as oil. Because we're doing you a favor. Take the buyout before you lose everything. The railroad will take this land one way or another. Eminent domain if necessary. This way, you at least walk away with something. There is no railroad expansion through this territory. I would have heard about it. Coulter's voice was deadly calm. This is a land grab. You found out I still own valuable property, and you want it cheap. The answer is no. Garrett's smile turned cold. You always were stubborn, just like your father. Look where it got him. Off my land. Now. We'll be back with a better offer, and next time maybe we'll talk to your wife instead. See if she's more reasonable. Coulter moved so fast that both men stepped back. You go anywhere near her, and I'll make you regret it. That's not a threat. It's a promise. Touchy. Garrett mounted his horse. Think about it, Hayes. This territory is changing. Progress is coming whether you like it or not. Better to profit from it than be crushed by it. They rode away at a leisurely pace, making it clear they weren't intimidated. Coulter stood watching them until they disappeared from sight, his whole body vibrating with anger. Lian approached cautiously. Coulter? He spun around, and for a second she saw something wild in his eyes. Then he focused on her, and the wildness faded to exhaustion. You heard? Most of it. Who were they really? Exactly who they claimed to be. Garrett Morrison was my father's partner in several ventures, made a fortune off Hayes deals. When I sold everything, he lost his access to that fortune. He's been trying to claw his way back ever since. Is there really a railroad expansion? No. Or if there is, it's not going through here. They're lying to pressure me into selling. Coulter kicked at the dirt. But they're not wrong about one thing. This territory is changing. More people moving in. More development. The isolation I came here for won't last forever. Does that matter? I don't know. Maybe not anymore. He looked at her. I'm sorry they mentioned you. I should have anticipated that. I can handle myself. I know, but you shouldn't have to handle vultures like Morrison. They walked back toward the barn in tense silence. Lian could feel Coulter's anger radiating off him in waves. What will they do if you keep refusing? She asked. Escalate. Start spreading rumors. Maybe try to force a sale through legal manipulation. Morrison's good at finding loopholes and pressure points. Can he actually take your land? Not legally, but legally and practically are different things out here. If he gets the local authorities on his side, claims I'm not maintaining the property properly, poses a danger to the community. Coulter shrugged. There are ways. Then we fight back. With what? I've spent 3 years making people think I'm a broke hermit. How do I suddenly prove I'm competent without revealing the truth about my finances? Maybe it's time to stop hiding. Coulter stopped walking. What? You've been playing this game for 3 years, pretending to be poor, avoiding people, isolating yourself. And for what? So vultures like Morrison leave you alone? It didn't work. They found you anyway. Lian, no, listen. You said you came here to build something real, to work land you actually loved, to escape the poison of wealth. But you're still letting that poison control you. You're still making decisions based on fear of what people will do if they know the truth. Coulter's jaw tightened. It's not that simple. Isn't it? You have resources. Use them. You have knowledge of business and law that Morrison probably doesn't expect you to use. Use that too. Stop acting like a victim and start acting like someone who has the power to fight back. and reveal that I've been lying to everyone for 3 years? You weren't lying. You were protecting yourself. There's a difference. And now that protection is becoming a prison. Lian grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. You told me you didn't want this ranch to become another trap, so don't let it be one. Don't let Morrison and men like him dictate how you live. Coulter stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was harsh and a little broken, but genuine. You're right. You're absolutely right, and I hate it. Why? Because fighting back means engaging with all the things I ran away from. Business, politics, social maneuvering, all the garbage I swore I'd never touch again. You don't have to do it alone this time. He looked at her sharply. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm your partner. In everything. If you fight, I fight. If you need help navigating this, I'll help. 2 minds are better than 1, and I'm very good at seeing through liars. I had plenty of practice back home. Something shifted in Coulter's expression. The fear and anger gave way to something else. Determination, maybe, or hope. All right, we fight back. But carefully. Smart. We need to know what Morrison is really after before we make any moves. Agreed. How do we find out? Coulter thought for a moment. William Reed. He knows everything that happens in this territory. If there's real railroad expansion planned, he'll know. If Morrison's been talking to other ranchers, he'll know that too. Can we trust him? William? Yeah. He's one of the few genuinely good people out here. Helped me when I first came back, didn't ask questions, didn't spread gossip. Coulter started toward the house. I'll ride into town tomorrow, see what he knows. We'll ride into town tomorrow, Lian corrected. You don't have to. Partnership, remember? Besides, Mary might know things the men don't. Women talk differently. We might hear things you'd miss. Coulter studied her face, then nodded slowly. All right, together then. They spent the rest of the day finishing the calving checks and preparing for the town trip. That night over dinner, they strategized like generals planning a campaign. Morrison said they'd be back with a better offer, Lian said. How long do you think we have? A week, maybe 2. He'll want to give me time to stew on it, get desperate. And when he comes back, we'll know more by then. Know what he's really planning. Know who else he's talked to. Then we can make an informed decision about how to handle him. You mean tell him to go to hell, but with evidence to back it up? Coulter grinned. Exactly. The trip to Clearwater the next day was tense with purpose. They rode in with the wagon loaded with goods to sell. Eggs, vegetables from the garden Lian had started, some beef Coulter had butchered. It was a cover story, but also practical. If they were going to stay on this ranch, they needed to integrate into the local economy better. William was behind the counter when they arrived. His eyebrows rose when he saw them both. 2 visits in 1 month? Should I be worried? Maybe, Coulter said. We need to talk, privately. William's expression sobered. He called to his assistant to watch the store and led them to a back room. What's wrong? Garrett Morrison came to see me yesterday. Him and one of his thugs, talking about railroad expansion and buyouts. William swore creatively. I was afraid of that. So there is something going on. Not what he told you. There's no railroad expansion through your land. But Morrison's been buying up properties all over the territory, small ranches mostly, places owned by people who can't fight back legally. He's assembling something big. For what purpose? That's the question everyone's asking. Some think he's planning a cattle empire. Others say mining interests. A few suspect he's just land banking, waiting for prices to go up. William leaned against the wall. Whatever it is, he's been ruthless about it. Offered lowball prices, used legal pressure, even spread rumors about properties being cursed or diseased, anything to force sales. Coulter's hands clenched. Has he been to other ranchers around me? Yeah, the Patterson place to your west, the Chen family to the north. Both refused to sell so far, but Morrison's patient. He'll keep applying pressure until something cracks. Lian spoke up. What kind of pressure? William looked at her, seemed to weigh something, then decided to be honest. Legal challenges to water rights, claims of property line disputes, anonymous complaints to the territorial authorities about unsafe conditions or illegal activities. He's good at making life difficult until people give up. Can he actually win those challenges? In court? Probably not, but fighting them costs money and time and emotional energy. Most small ranchers can't afford a prolonged legal battle. They sell just to make it stop. Coulter was pacing now, agitated. So what's his weak point? Every manipulator has one. His reputation, Williams said immediately. Morrison's built an image as a respectable businessman, pillar of the community, charitable donor. If that image cracks, his whole operation falls apart. People won't trust him. Banks won't work with him. He becomes just another land-grabbing vulture. How do we crack it? Prove he's using illegal methods. Document the intimidation, the false claims, the manipulation. Get enough evidence to take to the territorial governor or even the federal authorities. Lian felt a spark of recognition. This was familiar territory, not the American legal system specifically, but the principle of it. Powerful people overextending, creating vulnerabilities in their arrogance. He threatened me yesterday, she said quietly. Said next time he might talk to me directly instead of Coulter, that he'd see if I was more reasonable. William's face darkened. That's witness intimidation. If you're willing to testify to it, I am. Coulter stopped pacing. No, I'm not putting you in Morrison's crosshairs. I'm already there. He mentioned me. That makes me part of this whether you like it or not. She's right, William said. And honestly, having a witness to his threats might be exactly what we need. Morrison's used to dealing with men he can bully or buy. He might underestimate Lian. That's what I'm afraid of. He might underestimate her and then try something dangerous. Lian stood up, planting herself directly in front of Coulter. I am not fragile. I crossed an ocean to get here. I survived my village turning against me. I've worked through calving season without complaint. Stop treating me like I need protection and start treating me like the partner you claim I am. The room went silent. William suddenly became very interested in examining his boots. Coulter's jaw worked. Finally, he said, You're right. I'm sorry. Old habits. Break them. I'm trying. He took a breath. All right. We document everything. Every visit Morrison makes, every threat, every manipulative move. We talk to the other ranchers he's targeted, see if they'll share their stories. We build a case. And if he escalates before we're ready, William asked, then we improvise. But at least we'll see it coming. They spent another hour going over details, strategies, potential pitfalls. By the time they left William's store, they had the beginnings of a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Mary caught Lian before they could leave town. I heard Morrison's been sniffing around your ranch, she said in Cantonese. Be careful. He's dangerous. How dangerous? The kind that hides behind respectability while doing terrible things. My husband's laundry handles linens for several of Morrison's properties. We see things, hear things. Mary lowered her voice. Workers who complain suddenly disappear. Properties that won't sell suddenly catch fire. Nothing provable, but the pattern's there. Lian felt ice in her stomach. Has he killed anyone? I don't know. Maybe. Probably not directly. He's too smart for that. But indirectly? Through pressure and cruelty and systematic destruction? Yes. Absolutely yes. Then we need to be smarter than him. Mary gripped her arm. Don't underestimate him because you're angry. That's how good people get destroyed. I won't. But I won't cower either. Good. You'll need that fire. Just don't let it consume you. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Both Coulter and Lian were lost in thought, processing everything they'd learned. The situation was worse than they'd realized. Morrison wasn't just an opportunistic land grabber, he was systematic, ruthless, and well protected by his reputation. We need help, Lian said finally. We can't fight him alone. Who would help us? Most people think I'm a broke hermit barely hanging on. Then maybe it's time to change that perception. Carefully, selectively. Show people you're not what Morrison expects you to be. And reveal the truth about the Hayes fortune? Not all of it. Just enough to establish credibility, to show you're serious and capable and not someone who can be pushed around. Coulter considered this. It would be a risk. Once that door opens, I can't close it again. Every choice is a risk, but hiding clearly isn't working anymore. They rode in silence for a while longer. Then Coulter said, All right, we do it your way. Careful, selective revelation. Build alliances. Establish credibility. Fight Morrison with the one thing he doesn't expect from me. What's that? The willingness to actually fight back instead of running away. When they reached the ranch, the sun was setting in that spectacular Wyoming way that still took Lian's breath away. They put away the horses together, moving in the synchronized rhythm they'd developed over weeks of working side by side. As they walked toward the house, Coulter reached for Lian's hand. She took it without hesitation. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For being fierce when I wanted to hide, for being smart when I was just angry, for being my partner when I needed one most." Lian squeezed his hand. "That's what partnership means. You do the same for me." "Do I?" "You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. You treated me like an equal when everyone else saw me as less than. You trusted me with your truth when you could have kept lying." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "You saved me, Coulter. In all the ways that matter. Let me save you back." He kissed her then, there in the fading light, with the ranch spreading around them like a promise. It was less tentative than their first kiss, more certain. When they broke apart, Coulter rested his forehead against hers. "We're really doing this, aren't we? Fighting Morrison. Building a life. All of it." "Yes, we really are. It's going to get ugly. Probably. He's going to come after us hard." "Let him try." Coulter laughed, and it sounded almost carefree. "You're terrifying when you're determined, you know that?" "Good. Morrison should be terrified too." They went inside together, two people who'd started as strangers bound by a contract and were becoming something far more dangerous, partners who trusted each other enough to fight back against the world that had broken them both. Outside, night fell over the Wyoming plains. Somewhere out there, Garrett Morrison was plotting his next move, confident in his ability to crush one more obstacle. He had no idea what he was actually up against. Two people with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for were the most dangerous kind. And Coulter Hayes and Lian Hua were done running. Morrison returned exactly 9 days later, and this time he brought a lawyer. Lian spotted them from the vegetable garden she'd been weeding, 3 riders approaching in the late morning sun. She recognized Morrison's expensive horse immediately. The other 2 were strangers, one a thin man in spectacles carrying a leather satchel, the other built like a bull with eyes that scanned the ranch like he was calculating its value. She didn't run to find Coulter. Instead, she stood up, brushed dirt from her hands, and walked calmly toward the house. By the time the riders reached the front yard, she was standing on the porch with her arms crossed, blocking the door. Morrison's smile was all teeth. "Mrs. Hayes, what a pleasure. Is your husband home?" "He's working." "Perhaps you could fetch him? We have important business to discuss." "Perhaps you could state your business to me. I'm his partner." The thin man with spectacles looked uncomfortable. The bull-faced one smirked. Morrison's smile never wavered. "Of course. How modern. This is Mr. Blackwell, my attorney, and Mr. Crane, who handles property assessments. We've come with a revised offer for the ranch. Very generous. I think you'll find it quite compelling." "We're not interested in selling." Now, don't be hasty. You haven't even heard the terms." "Don't need to. The answer is no." Morrison's smile tightened. "Mrs. Hayes, I understand you're new to this country. Perhaps you don't fully grasp the situation. Your husband is drowning in debt, running a ranch he can barely maintain. This offer represents financial security, a fresh start. My husband isn't drowning in anything except work, and the ranch is doing fine." "Is it?" Morrison gestured around. "I see no hired hands, no signs of professional management, just you and Hayes struggling to keep up. That's admirable in a way, but hardly sustainable." Lian felt anger building, but kept her voice level. "You're very concerned about our welfare for someone who's never met us before 3 weeks ago." The bull-faced Crane snorted. "She's got a mouth on her. Mr. Crane, please." Morrison's tone was reproachful, but his eyes glinted with something ugly. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm trying to help. The railroad expansion will happen with or without your cooperation. Wouldn't you prefer to profit from it rather than be displaced by eminent domain?" "There is no railroad expansion. We checked." That wiped the smile off Morrison's face. "I beg your pardon?" "We spoke to the Territorial Planning Office. No railroad routes approved through this region. No expansion planned for at least 5 years. You're lying." Morrison's expression went cold. "I see your husband has been filling your head with paranoid nonsense. That's unfortunate. What's unfortunate is you riding onto our property with threats disguised as offers. Now get off our land before I shoot you for trespassing." All three men stared at her. Then Morrison laughed, but it sounded forced. "You're joking, of course." Lian pulled a rifle from where it had been leaning beside the door, just out of sight. She didn't point it at them, just held it casually. "I don't joke about trespassers. My husband taught me to shoot last week. I'm not very good yet, but at this range, even I could hit something." The lawyer Blackwell looked genuinely alarmed. "Mrs. Hayes, threatening us with a weapon is—" "I haven't threatened anyone. I'm simply standing on my own porch holding my own rifle. You're the ones who need to leave." She raised her voice. "Coulter, we have visitors who are just leaving." From somewhere behind the barn, Coulter appeared. He took in the scene with one glance, Lian on the porch with the rifle, Morrison and his men looking furious and unsettled, and his expression went dark. "What's going on here?" "Mr. Morrison brought a revised offer," Lian said calmly. "I declined. Now they're leaving." Coulter walked toward them with deliberate slowness, his own rifle slung over his shoulder. "That's right. You are leaving, and you're not coming back." Morrison's voice turned sharp. "This is a mistake, Hayes. I'm offering you a way out before things get difficult." "Difficult how?" "The territory is growing. New regulations, new requirements for property maintenance and safety standards. Ranches that don't comply face fines, potential seizure. It would be a shame if your operation came under scrutiny." "Is that a threat?" "It's a friendly warning, from one businessman to another." Coulter stepped closer, and there was something in his posture that made even Crane's hand drift toward his belt. "I'm going to say this once, Morrison. I know what you're doing. I know you've been buying up land through intimidation and fraud. I know about the false complaints, the legal harassment, the systematic destruction of anyone who won't sell. And I'm telling you now, it won't work on me." Morrison's face flushed. "You're making serious accusations with no proof." "Yet. No proof yet. But I'm working on it. And when I have enough evidence, I'm taking it to the territorial governor myself. Wonder how many of your other acquisitions will look suspicious once people start investigating." The lawyer Blackwell touched Morrison's arm. "Perhaps we should go." But Morrison wasn't finished. He looked at Lian with open contempt. "You've chosen poorly, Mrs. Hayes. Your husband is a washed-up heir playing cowboy. This ranch will fail, and when it does, you'll wish you'd taken my offer." "Then I'll live with that regret," Lian said. "But I won't live with the knowledge that I gave up without a fight. Now get off our property before I stop being polite." Morrison wheeled his horse around with unnecessary force. "This isn't over." "No," Coulter said. "It's not. But you picked the wrong target this time." The three men rode away, and Lian didn't lower the rifle until they disappeared from sight. Then her hands started shaking. Coulter was beside her immediately, gently taking the rifle. "You all right?" "I threatened them with a gun." "Yeah, you did. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Both, probably." She laughed, high and sharp with adrenaline. "I can't believe I just did that. You were amazing. Terrifying, but amazing." He set the rifle aside and pulled her into a hug. "But please don't do that again. Morrison is dangerous." "He threatened to come after me directly. I wasn't going to stand there and be intimidated." "I know, and I'm proud of you, but also slightly terrified for you." He pulled back to look at her face. "We need to be more careful now. He's going to escalate." "Let him. We'll be ready." They went inside, both running on adrenaline and anger. Coulter made coffee with shaking hands while Lian recounted the entire conversation. When she got to the part about threatening to shoot them, he laughed despite himself. "You've been here 2 months, and you're already more Wyoming than I am." Desperation makes you bold. Or crazy. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. He set down his coffee cup. "Morrison mentioned new regulations and compliance requirements. That worries me. Can he actually manufacture violations?" "If he has the right people in his pocket, yeah. Inspectors who'll find problems that don't exist. Officials who'll sign off on complaints without investigating. It's been done before." "Then we need allies. People who can vouch for the ranch's condition. People Morrison can't intimidate or buy." Coulter thought for a moment. "The Pattersons. The Chen family. If Morrison's targeting all of us, maybe we should band together. Make ourselves a harder target." "Williams said they both refused to sell. That means they're already fighting." "Yeah, but separately. Isolated. Morrison can pick us off one by one. Together we're stronger." So we talked to them. Build a coalition. Share information about Morrison's tactics. It's risky. If Morrison finds out we're organizing against him, he might strike faster. And if we don't organize, he picks us apart anyway. At least this way we're fighting instead of hiding. Coulter studied her face, and something like wonder crossed his expression. How did you get so brave? I'm not brave. I'm just too stubborn to quit. That's the same thing. They spent the rest of the day planning. Coulter would visit the Patterson Ranch tomorrow to feel out their situation and willingness to coordinate. Lian would talk to Mary and see what information the Chinese community had gathered about Morrison's operations. They'd document everything, every threat, every visit, every suspicious incident. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, Lian couldn't sleep. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind awareness of just how dangerous their situation had become. Morrison was powerful, connected, and ruthless. They were two people on an isolated ranch with more courage than resources. She must have made some sound because Coulter appeared in her doorway. Can't sleep? No. Me neither. Mind if I come in? She nodded, and he sat on the edge of her bed in the darkness. They'd been sharing more physical affection since that first kiss. Touches, embraces, sleeping in the same bed occasionally when nightmares or exhaustion drove them together. But they still maintained separate rooms, separate spaces, neither ready to fully commit to what they were becoming. I keep thinking about what Morrison said, Lian admitted, about me choosing poorly, about the ranch failing. He's trying to get in your head. That's what manipulators do. I know, but what if he's right? What if we're just deluding ourselves? Two broken people thinking they can fight a man with money and power and connections. Coulter was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "When my brother killed himself, I spent months thinking I should have seen it coming, should have saved him, should have done something different. And you know what I realized eventually? What? That I was giving myself too much credit. Samuel made his choice. His depression, his desperation, his inability to cope. Those weren't things I could have fixed. I was just a kid myself, drowning in the same poisonous system. The best I could do was survive it and try to build something different." He reached for her hand in the darkness. Morrison wants us to feel powerless because powerless people give up. But we're not powerless. We have knowledge, resources, allies, and most importantly, we have nothing left to lose. That makes us dangerous. Or stupid. Maybe both. But I'd rather be stupid and fighting than smart and defeated. Lian squeezed his hand. I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It's the people who aren't scared who make fatal mistakes. Are you scared? Terrified. But less so with you beside me. She pulled him down to lie beside her, and they stayed like that in the darkness, holding each other against the fear and uncertainty. Eventually, they both fell asleep, tangled together like two people trying to become one strong thing instead of two weak ones. Morning came with a storm rolling in from the mountains. Coulter rode out early to visit the Patterson Ranch while Lian took the wagon into town. The wind was picking up by the time she reached Clearwater, carrying the smell of rain. Mary was behind the counter of the laundry when Lian entered. She took one look at Lian's face and called to her husband that she was taking a break. What happened? Lian told her everything. Morrison's visit, the threats, the gun, the plan to organize resistance. Mary listened with growing alarm. You threatened Garrett Morrison with a rifle? Was that bad? Bad? It was. Mary started laughing. It was possibly the gutsiest thing I've heard anyone do in years, but also possibly the stupidest. Everyone keeps saying that, because it's true. Morrison doesn't forgive humiliation. He'll come after you now, not just your ranch, you personally. Let him try. Mary's expression turned serious. Don't underestimate him, Lian. I've seen what he does to people who cross him. There was a rancher 2 years ago who refused to sell. Morrison didn't just destroy his business. He destroyed his reputation, his marriage, his will to live. The man hanged himself in his barn. Ice flooded Lian's veins. Morrison killed him? Not directly, but he might as well have. Created enough pressure, enough misery, enough hopelessness that death seemed like the only escape. Then we stop him before he can do that to anyone else. How? By exposing him. By documenting everything. By refusing to be isolated victims. Lian leaned forward. Mary, you said the Chinese community sees things, Here's things. Can you help us gather evidence? Statements from people Morrison has hurt? Documentation of his illegal activities? Mary looked torn. That would put a target on all of us. The target's already there. He's just picking us off one by one because we're not fighting back together. And if we fight back and lose, then at least we tried. At least we didn't just roll over and die. Mary studied her for a long moment. Then she made a decision. All right, I'll talk to people, see what they're willing to share. But Lian, be careful. Morrison has eyes everywhere. If he finds out what we're doing before we're ready, I know, we'll be careful. By the time Lian got back to the ranch, the storm had broken. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the roads to mud. She found Coulter in the barn, soaked and exhausted. How did it go with the Pattersons? Mixed. They're willing to share information about Morrison's tactics, but not willing to organize openly against him. They're scared. He stripped off his wet shirt, wringing it out. Can't say I blame them. They've got 3 kids and a mortgage, more to lose than we do. Did they tell you anything useful? Yeah, Morrison's been filing complaints about their water usage, claiming they're diverting from shared sources illegally. It's all fabricated, but fighting it requires lawyers they can't afford. That's his pattern, legal harassment that bleeds people dry. Exactly. Mrs. Patterson said 2 other families in the area have already sold to make it stop. Morrison's systematic about it, finds the pressure point for each property and exploits it ruthlessly. They stood in the barn listening to rain hammer the roof. Lightning flashed, illuminating Coulter's tired face. We're in over our heads, he said quietly. Probably. Morrison has resources we can't match, connections we don't have, experience destroying people who get in his way. Yes. So why aren't we running? Lian moved closer to him. Because running didn't work for either of us before. You ran from your family legacy and ended up isolated and alone. I ran from my village's judgment and ended up with nothing. We're done running. Even if it means we might lose everything? We've already lost everything once. What's once more? Coulter laughed, sharp and bitter. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or completely insane. Why not both? He pulled her into a kiss that tasted like rain and desperation and defiance. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he said, I need to tell you something. What? I still have significant financial resources. The Hayes fortune I sold off. I kept enough invested that I could hire the best lawyers in the territory. I could fight Morrison in court for years if needed. I could probably even buy him out if it came to it. Lian stared at him. Then why haven't you? Because the moment I reveal that, everything changes. I stop being the broke hermit Morrison can push around. I become a Hayes again, a threat, a target. And so do you. I'm already a target. Not like this. Right now, Morrison sees you as a mail-order bride married to a washed-up rancher, barely worth his attention. If he finds out you're married to someone with real money and power, you become leverage, a weakness he can exploit. Understanding dawned. You've been protecting me by staying poor. Trying to, but it's not working anymore. Morrison's already coming after us. The question is, do we fight him with the resources we have, or do we keep pretending we're powerless? Lian thought about it, about the risk of revealing Coulter's wealth versus the risk of fighting Morrison without resources, about protection versus partnership, about safety versus agency. Use the money, she said finally. Hire lawyers. Fight back properly. I'd rather be a target as your equal than safe as your dependent. You're sure? Once we go down this road, I'm sure. We're partners. That means sharing the risks along with everything else. Coulter searched her face, then nodded. All right. Tomorrow I send telegrams to my lawyers in Denver. We build a real case against Morrison. Legal, documented, impossible to dismiss. And if he escalates before we're ready, then we improvise. But at least we'll be fighting instead of cowering. The storm raged outside as they made plans. 2 people choosing to stand and fight instead of running away. It was reckless and dangerous and possibly suicidal, but it was also the first time either of them had chosen to face their fears instead of hiding from them. That night, they slept in the same bed with the storm raging outside and the future uncertain. But for the first time since Lian had arrived on this ranch, they both slept soundly. Not because they felt safe, but because they'd made a choice to fight for something worth keeping. The next week was a flurry of activity. Coulter sent multiple telegrams to lawyers, investigators, and business contacts in Denver. Lian continued gathering information from Mary and the Chinese community. William Reed quietly spread the word among sympathetic locals that the Hayes Ranch was looking for statements about Morrison's business practices. The response was overwhelming. Turned out half the territory had a grievance against Garrett Morrison. Ranchers he'd cheated, workers he'd stiffed on wages, small businesses he'd driven into bankruptcy. People who'd been too afraid or isolated to speak up before suddenly had a focal point for their anger. "This is bigger than I thought," Coulter said one night, sorting through pages of statements and complaints. "Morrison's been operating like this for over a decade. How has no one stopped him before?" "Because he's careful, targets people who can't fight back, spreads his illegal activities across enough jurisdictions that no single authority sees the full pattern." Lian added another document to the pile. "But now we're connecting the dots, making the pattern visible. If we can get this in front of the territorial governor, Morrison's done. His reputation will be destroyed. His business partners will flee. He'll be lucky to avoid prison." "That's a big if. We need more than statements. We need documents, proof of fraud, intimidation, illegal land transfers." "Working on it. My investigator in Denver is digging through public records, finding all the properties Morrison acquired in suspicious circumstances." They worked late into the night, building their case piece by piece. It was tedious, detail-oriented work that required more patience than either of them naturally possessed. But every new piece of evidence felt like ammunition against the man who'd threatened everything they were building. 2 weeks after Morrison's second visit, a stranger rode up to the ranch. He was young, well-dressed, and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being listened to. "Mr. Hayes? I'm James Wheeler, attorney from Denver. You sent for me?" Coulter shook his hand, relief evident. "You made good time. Your telegram suggested urgency, and frankly, the case you described sounded fascinating. I've been wanting to go after Morrison for years." "You know him?" "Know of him. He's careful to keep his hands clean in Denver, but rumors follow him. If half of what you've gathered is true, this could be the biggest corruption case the territory has seen." They spent 3 days going over everything with Wheeler. He was sharp, methodical, and increasingly excited as the scope of Morrison's operation became clear. "This is extraordinary," he said, reviewing the documents. "You've essentially built a RICO case before RICO exists. Pattern of criminal activity spanning multiple jurisdictions, using threats and fraud to acquire property illegally." "Can we win?" Lian asked. "In court?" "Absolutely. But Morrison won't let it get to court if he can help it. He'll try to shut this down before we file." "How?" Wheeler's expression turned grim. "Intimidation, bribery, violence if necessary. Men like Morrison don't go down quietly. They fight dirty." "So do we," Coulter said. "Good. Because the moment we file these complaints, you'll have a target on your backs. Both of you. I need to know you're prepared for that." Len and Coulter exchanged glances. Then Lian said, "We're prepared. File everything." Wheeler nodded. "I'll start drafting the formal complaints tomorrow. We'll file simultaneously with the territorial governor, the federal land office, and the district court. Hit him from multiple directions at once so he can't shut down all the investigations." "How long before Morrison knows?" "The moment we file, he'll know, which gives you maybe 24 hours to prepare for his response." That night, Lian couldn't sleep again. The enormity of what they were doing kept crashing over her in waves. They were going after one of the most powerful men in the territory with nothing but evidence and audacity. If they failed, Morrison would destroy them. If they succeeded, they'd make enemies of everyone connected to him. Coulter found her on the porch, staring out at the dark plains. Second thoughts? 100th thoughts. 1,000th thoughts. But not second thoughts. "We're doing the right thing." He sat beside her, their shoulders touching. "For what it's worth, I'm terrified too." "Good. If you weren't scared, I'd think you were crazy." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars wheel overhead. The night was clear and cold, beautiful in the way that only Wyoming wilderness could be. "Can I tell you something?" Coulter said eventually. "Always. When you first arrived, I thought I was getting a partner for ranch work. Someone to help with the physical labor. That's all I thought I needed." And I was an idiot. I didn't need a ranch hand. I needed someone who'd stand beside me and refuse to let me hide. Someone brave enough to face the things I'd been running from. Someone who'd choose to fight instead of flee. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. I needed you, Lian. Not just for the work, for everything. You saved me from becoming a coward who died alone on his ranch, too afraid to live. Lian felt tears burning her eyes. You saved me, too, from being the unwanted woman who accepted whatever scraps life threw at her. You gave me a reason to be fierce instead of defeated. We're quite a pair. The most unlikely pair I could have imagined. And yet here we are, about to take on a corrupt land baron with nothing but stubbornness and spite. Don't forget the lawyers. Right. Stubbornness, spite, and expensive legal representation. They laughed, and it felt good to laugh in the face of everything coming. To choose joy and defiance over fear and resignation. Whatever happens, Coulter said quietly, I want you to know. I don't regret any of it. Not the marriage contract, not bringing you here, not falling in love with you. Lian's breath caught. You love me? Yeah, I do. Probably have for weeks now. Just took me this long to admit it. She turned to face him fully. I love you too. I didn't plan to, didn't expect to, but somewhere between the calving season and threatening Morrison with a rifle, I fell completely in love with you. He kissed her then, soft and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, both of them were crying and smiling at the same time. We're going to survive this, Coulter said. Morrison, the legal battle, all of it. We're going to win and build the life we both deserve. How can you be sure? Because I finally have something worth fighting for. And I'm not letting anyone take it from me. Not Morrison, not fear, not the past, nothing. They went inside together and made love for the first time, not in desperation or fear, but in hope and commitment. Two broken people choosing to become whole together. Two fighters preparing for the battle of their lives by reminding themselves what they were fighting for. Outside, the Wyoming night stretched endlessly in all directions. Somewhere out there, Garrett Morrison was sleeping soundly, confident in his power and invulnerability. He had no idea that tomorrow his whole world would begin to crumble. And the two people he'd underestimated most, a washed-up heir and a Chinese bride nobody wanted, were about to show him exactly what happened when you push too hard against people with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The war was coming. And this time, Coulter Hayes and Lian Hua were ready. Wheeler filed the complaints on a Tuesday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, all hell broke loose. The first sign was William Reed riding out to the ranch at a speed that suggested panic. He pulled up in front of the house, his horse lathered and breathing hard. Coulter! Lian! You need to hear this! They came running from the barn where they'd been reinforcing the doors, a precaution Wheeler had suggested. William dismounted, waving a newspaper. Morrison's fighting back. He went straight to the Clearwater Gazette, published a statement calling you both frauds and criminals. Coulter grabbed the paper. The headline screamed, Local rancher accused of fabricating evidence in land dispute. The article was a masterpiece of manipulation, painting Coulter as a disgruntled heir trying to destroy a respectable businessman out of jealousy, and Lian as a foreign opportunist who'd manipulated a vulnerable man into marriage. This is garbage, Coulter said, his voice shaking with rage. Every word is a lie. I know, but half the town doesn't. Morrison's been buying drinks at the saloon, telling everyone who'll listen that you're trying to steal his legitimately acquired properties, that you fabricated evidence because you're bitter about losing the Hayes fortune. William looked apologetic. Some people are believing him. Lian felt ice in her stomach. What about the people who gave us statements? The ones Morrison hurt? That's the other problem. 3 of them have already recanted, said they were coerced into lying about Morrison. He got to them. How? Coulter demanded. Money, probably, or threats, or both. Morrison's systematic about this. He's already undermining the case before it even gets to court. They stood in tense silence, processing this. Wheeler had warned them Morrison would fight dirty, but the speed and effectiveness of his counterattack was breathtaking. What do we do? Lian asked. We don't panic, Coulter said, though his clenched fist betrayed his own fear. Wheeler expected this. We stick to the plan. Let the evidence speak for itself. And if Morrison turns the whole town against us, then we fight anyway. We didn't come this far to back down now. But over the next 3 days, the situation deteriorated faster than either of them anticipated. Morrison had clearly spent years building goodwill in the community, and he cashed it all in at once. The general store refused to sell them supplies. The blacksmith turned them away. Even people who'd been friendly before now crossed the street to avoid them. Mary was one of the few who stayed loyal. She came to the ranch on Thursday with a basket of food and a warning. "It's bad in town," she said. "Morrison's got people convinced you're the villains. He's painting himself as the victim of a vindictive campaign by an unstable rich boy and his scheming foreign wife." "Do you believe him?" Lian asked. "Of course not. I've seen what he does. But I'm in the minority." Mary set down the basket. "There's talk of running you out of the territory. Some of Morrison's men have been making noise about teaching you a lesson." Coulter's expression went dark. "Let them try. Don't be stupid. You're outnumbered and outgunned. If they come for you, if they come for us, we'll defend ourselves. This is our land, our home. I'm not abandoning it because Morrison spread some lies." Mary looked at Lian. "Can you talk sense into him?" "No, because he's right. We run now, we lose everything. At least if we stay and fight, we have a chance. A chance to get killed, maybe. Better than living as cowards." Mary threw up her hands. "You're both insane, but I suppose that's why you're still together." She softened slightly. "Just be careful. Morrison's not done yet. This is just the opening move." She was right. Friday night, someone tried to burn down the barn, when woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of horses screaming in panic. She and Coulter ran outside to find flames licking up the side of the barn. They worked frantically, hauling water, releasing the terrified horses, beating back the fire with wet blankets. By the time they got it under control, the damage was substantial. One whole side of the barn was charred and weakened. They'd lost feed stores, equipment, and nearly lost the horses. "This was deliberate," Coulter said, examining the burn pattern. "Someone poured accelerant here, started it from the outside. Morrison. Or someone working for him, same difference." They spent the rest of the night watching for another attack, rifles loaded, exhaustion making them both jumpy. But no one came. The arson had been a message. "We can reach you anytime we want." The next morning, Wheeler arrived from Denver with news. "The territorial governor has agreed to investigate Morrison. Your evidence was compelling enough to warrant official scrutiny." "That's good news," Coulter said. "It is. But there's a complication. Morrison has filed a countersuit claiming defamation and harassment. He's asking for damages that would bankrupt most ranchers." "But not me." Wheeler looked uncomfortable. "That's the thing. He knows you have money. His lawyers have been digging into your background. They know about the Hayes fortune you supposedly lost. They're arguing that you still have significant assets and you're using them to wage a personal vendetta." Lian felt a chill. "So he's attacking the one thing Coulter tried to keep hidden." "Exactly. And it's effective. The narrative shifts from powerful businessman versus struggling rancher to rich heir versus respectable entrepreneur. Morrison's lawyers are very good." "Can we win the defamation suit?" Coulter asked. "If the criminal investigation finds evidence of Morrison's fraud, the defamation suit dies. Truth is an absolute defense. But if the investigation stalls or gets compromised," Wheeler trailed off meaningfully, "then we're vulnerable. Very. Morrison's also been talking to territorial officials, suggesting that your marriage is fraudulent, that you brought Lian here under false pretenses, that it's a sham to manipulate immigration laws." Lian felt rage building. "That's insane. We're legally married. I know. But perception matters. If officials believe the marriage was fraudulent, it creates other legal vulnerabilities. Immigration status, property rights, your credibility as witnesses." They sat in heavy silence. Morrison had found every pressure point and was applying force systematically. The legal case, the community reputation, the ranch itself, even their marriage, everything was under attack simultaneously. "What do we do?" Coulter asked quietly. "We go on the offensive. Stop defending and start attacking. Morrison's strength is his reputation. We destroy that completely. He has nothing left." "How?" Wheeler pulled out a folder. "I've been investigating Morrison's business practices in Denver. Found some very interesting irregularities in his company's financial records. Tax evasion, fraudulent loans, shell companies hiding assets. Nothing proven yet, but enough to warrant federal investigation." "Will the federal government actually investigate?" "If we give them enough cause." And if we can connect Morrison's local crimes to interstate commerce violations, we can bring in federal prosecutors. They're much harder to bribe or intimidate than territorial officials. Lian leaned forward. What do you need from us? More documentation. Specifically, proof that Morrison's land acquisitions involved fraud, affecting properties purchased from out-of-territory sellers. That creates federal jurisdiction. We have some of that already, Coulter said. The Patterson property was originally owned by a family from Kansas. Morrison used fraudulent debt claims to force the sale. Perfect. Get me everything you have on that transaction and any others like it. I'll take it to federal prosecutors in Denver. They spent the weekend gathering every scrap of documentation they could find. William helped, rifling through county records for property transfers. Mary contributed information from the Chinese community about Morrison's various business dealings. Even the Pattersons, finally convinced that Morrison would destroy them regardless, shared their documentation. The case they built was damning. Morrison had been running a systematic fraud operation for over a decade, using intimidation, false claims, and manipulated legal proceedings to steal property across 3 territories. The scope of it was breathtaking. This is enough, Wheeler said on Sunday night, reviewing the assembled evidence. This is more than enough. I'm leaving for Denver first thing tomorrow. I'll be back in a week with federal prosecutors. A week is a long time, Lian said. Morrison won't wait that long. I know. That's why you need to be very, very careful. No heroics, no confrontations, just stay alive until the law catches up. After Wheeler left, Coulter and Lian stood on the porch watching the sun set. The burned barn was a dark scar against the landscape, a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. We should leave, Coulter said suddenly. Go to Denver with Wheeler. Stay there until this is resolved. No? Lian, be reasonable. Someone already tried to burn us out. Next time they might succeed. Then we defend better. But we don't abandon the ranch. That's what Morrison wants. He wants us scared and running. I won't give him that satisfaction. Coulter turned to face her. I can't lose you. If something happens because I was too stubborn to retreat, nothing's going to happen. We've survived everything else. We'll survive this. You don't know that. No. But I believe it. And right now, belief is all we have. They held each other as darkness fell, 2 people choosing to stand their ground even when retreat was the smarter option. Some battles weren't about smart. They were about principle, about refusing to let bullies win through intimidation. Morrison made his move on Tuesday. Lian was in the garden when she heard horses approaching, multiple riders moving fast. She grabbed the rifle they now kept nearby and ran toward the house. 6 men rode into the yard, led by Morrison's enforcer, Crane. They weren't bothering with pretense anymore. All of them were visibly armed, their expressions openly hostile. "Where's Hayes?" Crane demanded. "Not here." Lian kept the rifle pointed at the ground, but ready. "And you're trespassing. We have a warrant, signed by the territorial judge. Claims your husband has been harboring stolen property. That's a lie. Don't matter if it's a lie. We're authorized to search the premises." Coulter appeared from the barn, his own rifle in hand. "Let me see that warrant." Crane tossed a document toward him. Coulter picked it up, read it quickly, and his face went pale. "This is dated today. Morrison must have filed the complaint yesterday. Like I said, legal and proper. Now put down the guns and let us do our job. This is harassment. You know it. I know it. That warrant is based on fabricated evidence. Prove it in court. Right now, we're coming in." The 6 men dismounted, and Lian felt her heart hammering. They were outnumbered 3-1, and Morrison's men looked eager for violence. If this turned into a fight, she and Coulter would lose. But before anyone could move, more horses appeared on the horizon. A lot of horses. William Reed arrived first, followed by Mary and her husband. Then the Pattersons with their 3 grown sons. Then other ranchers Lian didn't recognize, and townspeople who'd been quietly sympathetic to their cause. Within minutes, 30 people had surrounded Morrison's men. Crane looked around, visibly calculating the odds. "This doesn't concern you people." "The hell it doesn't," William said. "We're tired of Morrison pushing folks around, tired of fake warrants and legal harassment. You want to search the Hayes place? You do it proper, with witnesses, and we're all witnesses. This is interference with legal. This is concerned citizens making sure the law is applied fairly, one of the Patterson sons interrupted. Now show us that warrant so we can all read it. Crane looked furious but outnumbered. He handed over the warrant and the crowd passed it around, murmuring skeptically. This says Hayes is harboring property stolen from Morrison's Denver office, Williams said. What property, specifically? That's confidential. Then how's Hayes supposed to know what to turn over? This warrant is garbage. No specific items listed, no probable cause, just blanket authorization to search and seize. Any judge who signed this should be disbarred. The crowd's murmur turned angry. Crane and his men were suddenly looking less confident and more cornered. We're not here to debate legalities, Crane said. We have our orders. And we're not letting you execute them based on a fraudulent warrant, Coulter said. His voice was steady, backed by the crowd of supporters. You want to search my property, get a proper warrant, one that specifies what you're looking for and provides actual probable cause. Until then, get off my land. Crane's hand drifted toward his gun. Immediately, a dozen rifles came up from the crowd. Don't, Williams said quietly. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Leave now while you can. The tension stretched like wire ready to snap. Then Crane spat in the dirt and remounted his horse. This isn't over. We know, Coulter said. Tell Morrison we're not backing down. Not now, not ever. The 6 men rode away at a gallop, and the crowd erupted in cheers. People clapped Coulter on the back, shook Lian's hand, promised support. It was overwhelming and humbling. Thank you, Coulter said, his voice rough with emotion. All of you. I don't know how to repay. Don't need repayment, William interrupted. Just needed someone to stand up first. You did that. We're just backing your play. After everyone left, Coulter and Lian collapsed on the porch steps, adrenaline draining away and leaving exhaustion. That was close, Lian said. Too close. If the community hadn't shown up, Coulter didn't finish the thought. But they did. We're not alone anymore. No, we're not. That changes everything. Word of the standoff spread through the territory like wildfire. Morrison's intimidation tactics had finally backfired. Instead of isolating Coulter and Lian, he'd created martyrs that the community rallied around. People who'd been too afraid to speak up before suddenly found courage in numbers. By Thursday, Morrison was facing open rebellion. Ranchers he'd pressured were now refusing to sell. Business partners were distancing themselves. Even some territorial officials were asking uncomfortable questions about his operations. Wheeler returned from Denver on Friday with 2 federal prosecutors and a warrant for Morrison's arrest. The charges were extensive: fraud, racketeering, extortion, witness tampering, and conspiracy to deprive citizens of their property rights. The evidence Coulter and Lian had gathered, combined with the federal investigation into Morrison's interstate activities, had built an unassailable case. Morrison was arrested at his office in front of a crowd of witnesses. His lawyer protested loudly, but the federal warrant superseded any territorial authority. Morrison would be tried in federal court, where his local connections meant nothing. It's over, Wheeler told them that evening. Morrison's empire is collapsing. His business partners are scrambling to distance themselves. Properties he acquired through fraud are being reclaimed. He'll spend the next decade fighting legal battles, and he'll lose most of them. Coulter looked stunned. Just like that? Not just like that. It took months of investigation, hundreds of witness statements, and extraordinary courage from you two. But yes, it's over. You won. Lian felt tears burning her eyes. They'd won. Against all odds, against a powerful enemy, against their own fears. They'd actually won. The next weeks were a whirlwind. Morrison's trial became territorial news. Evidence of his crimes filled newspapers, shocking people who'd believed his respectable facade. The sheer scope of his fraud was staggering. Over 100 properties acquired illegally, thousands of dollars stolen, dozens of lives ruined. Coulter and Lian testified at the federal hearing. It was terrifying standing in front of judges and lawyers and crowds of spectators, recounting everything Morrison had done. But their testimony, backed by documentation and supported by dozens of other victims, was devastating. Morrison was convicted on 18 counts and sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. His assets were seized to pay restitution to his victims. His reputation was destroyed completely. In the aftermath, Clearwater changed. The corruption Morrison had enabled and benefited from was exposed and rooted out. The territorial judge who'd signed fraudulent warrants was removed from office. Officials who'd taken Morrison's bribes resigned or were prosecuted. And slowly, gradually, life at the ranch returned to something approaching normal. The burned barn was rebuilt, this time with help from the community who'd stood by them. The Pattersons and other neighboring ranchers formed a cooperative to protect against future land grabbers. The Chinese community in Clearwater became more integrated and visible, emboldened by the successful fight against Morrison. 6 months after Morrison's conviction, Lian stood in the rebuilt barn watching Coulter work with the horses. They'd hired 2 ranch hands finally, young men from town who needed work and had proven themselves trustworthy during the fight against Morrison. "Penny for your thoughts?" Coulter said, noticing her watching. "Just thinking about how far we've come. How different everything is now." He walked over, brushing hay from his hands. "Regret any of it?" "Not even a little. You?" "Are you kidding? I went from a lonely hermit to a married man with a community that actually respects me. I fought the biggest fight of my life and won. Why would I regret any of that?" Lian smiled. "When you put it that way, the only thing I regret is not finding you sooner, not having the courage to fight back years ago instead of hiding. You weren't ready years ago. Neither was I. We needed to break first before we could be strong." Coulter pulled her into an embrace. "You're too wise for someone who threatened a land baron with a rifle 6 months ago. Wisdom and stupidity aren't mutually exclusive." "Clearly." They stood together in the barn, surrounded by the fruits of their labor: healthy horses, organized equipment, a functioning ranch that wasn't just surviving but thriving. The work was still hard, the hours still long, but it felt different now. Purposeful instead of desperate, shared instead of solitary. That evening, sitting on the porch watching another spectacular Wyoming sunset, Lian thought about the journey that had brought her here. The shame and desperation in her village. The terror of crossing an ocean to marry a stranger. The shock of discovering Coulter's lies and the truth behind them. The slow building of partnership into love. The fight against Morrison that had tested everything they were becoming. None of it had been smooth or easy. They'd both made mistakes, acted out of fear, nearly given up a dozen times. But they'd survived. More than survived. They'd built something real and lasting. "What are you thinking about?" Coulter asked. "About how broken we both were when we met. How damaged and scared and convinced we couldn't trust anyone. And how choosing to trust each other anyway was the bravest thing either of us ever did. Braver than fighting Morrison. Braver than crossing oceans or abandoning fortunes. Just choosing to be vulnerable with another person." Coulter reached for her hand. "You know what I learned from all this?" "What?" "That running from your problems doesn't solve them. It just postpones them. I spent 3 years hiding on this ranch thinking I was protecting myself from the world. All I was really doing was protecting myself from living." He squeezed her hand. "You taught me the difference between safety and cowardice, between protecting yourself and imprisoning yourself. We taught each other. I was doing the same thing in my own way, accepting whatever scraps life threw at me because I thought I didn't deserve better. You showed me that fighting for what you want isn't selfish, it's necessary." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped toward the mountains, painting the sky in those impossible colors that still took Lian's breath away, even after months of seeing them. "I love you," Coulter said quietly. "Not just because you're brave or smart or fierce, but because you make me want to be better, braver, more honest, more alive." "I love you too, for all the same reasons." "Think we'll ever have a quiet, boring life?" "I doubt it. We're not built for quiet and boring." "No, I suppose we're not." Winter came to Wyoming with its usual harsh beauty, but this year the ranch was prepared. Well-stocked, well-staffed, well-defended. Coulter and Lian faced the cold months not with dread, but with quiet confidence. They spent long evenings by the fire, planning for spring. Coulter wanted to expand the cattle operation. Lian wanted to start a larger garden, maybe even sell produce in town. They talked about eventually hiring more help, about building a guest house for when William or Mary visited, about the future they were creating together. One night in deep January, when snow was falling soft and steady outside, Lian told Coulter she was pregnant. He stared at her for a long moment, processing. Then joy broke across his face like sunrise. "We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby." He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. When he set her down, his hands were shaking. "I don't know how to be a father. My own father was terrible at it. And my mother died when I was young, so I barely remember her. We're both making this up as we go." Lian cupped his face. "But we'll figure it out together, just like we've figured out everything else. Together. Always together." The baby came in early September, a daughter with Coulter's dark eyes and Lian's stubborn chin. They named her Sarah, after Coulter's mother, with a middle name in Chinese that meant strong heart. Holding his daughter for the first time, Coulter felt something shift in his chest. This was what he'd been running from all those years. Not wealth or society or responsibility. He'd been running from the vulnerability of caring about something so much that losing it would destroy you. But looking at Sarah's tiny face, feeling Lian's exhausted weight against his shoulder, he realized that vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was the price of everything worth having: love, family, home, purpose. They all required you to risk your heart completely, and that risk was worth it, every single time. The years that followed weren't perfect. The ranch had good seasons and bad. Sarah was colicky as an infant, stubborn as a toddler, fearless in a way that terrified both her parents. Coulter and Lian fought sometimes, disagreed often, struggled with the challenges of building a life together from two different cultures and two broken pasts. But they never stopped choosing each other, never stopped fighting for what they'd built, never stopped being partners in every sense of the word. The ranch became known throughout the territory, not for wealth or size, but for integrity. Coulter and Lian had a reputation for fair dealing, hard work, and standing up for what was right. People sought their counsel. Young ranchers asked for advice. The community that had rallied around them during the Morrison fight remained close, a network of mutual support and respect. Sometimes, late at night when Sarah was asleep and the ranch was quiet, Lian would think about the girl she'd been in China. Unwanted, desperate, convinced her life was over at 23. That girl could never have imagined this. A ranch in Wyoming, a husband who loved her, a daughter who was growing up free and fierce, a community that respected her. The journey from there to here had been brutal and terrifying and beautiful. It had required courage she didn't know she had, strength she'd developed through necessity, and faith in the possibility that broken things could be remade into something better. She'd crossed an ocean expecting nothing but survival. She'd found a partner, a purpose, and a home worth fighting for. That was the real story, she thought, not the dramatic confrontation with Morrison or the courtroom victory or even the romance of two lonely people finding each other. The real story was simpler and more profound. Two people who'd been taught that they were worthless had chosen to believe otherwise, had chosen to fight for dignity and agency and love, had refused to let the world's judgment define their worth. And in that refusal, in that stubborn insistence on their own value, they'd built something that transcended their individual brokenness: a partnership, a family, a legacy of courage that would outlive them both. 10 years after Lian had first stepped off that wagon into Coulter's uncertain welcome, she stood on the porch watching the sunrise with Sarah on her hip and another child growing inside her. Coulter was already out checking the cattle, but he'd be back for breakfast. He always came back. The Wyoming plains stretched endlessly in all directions, golden in the morning light, beautiful and harsh and unforgiving, but also full of possibility for people brave enough to claim it. Lian had been that brave. So had Coulter. Together, they'd built something that proved what she'd always suspected but never dared believe: that unwanted things could become precious, that broken people could heal each other, that courage wasn't the absence of fear but the choice to fight despite it. That love, real love, wasn't about perfection or ease. It was about partnership, about choosing someone every day, even when it was hard, about building something together that neither of you could have built alone. She'd come to Wyoming with nothing but a battered suitcase and a marriage contract signed by strangers. She was leaving nothing behind when she eventually left this world, because everything she built, everything she fought for, everything she loved would continue in Sarah and the children to come, in the land they'd protected, in the community they'd helped build. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.